it's Presley at ActOutGames.com here, and today we're going to be talking about Turtles All the Way Down, which is John Green's new book.
Yep.
We listened to it on Audible,
Yep.
and it was so good.
Yeah, one of the good things about living in Los Angeles is we have lots of time in the car to listen to audiobooks.
Yeah.
And I have burned through a ton of books, this being one of them, and this was one of the best ones that we've listened to, certainly. It was so good. It was fantastic. I really loved it, right?
Yeah.
So just to little caveat up front, I think this is going to be at least a little bit spoilery. This is moderately spoilery.
Pretty spoiler.
I don't think we're going to ruin like the major plot points.
Yeah.
But we're definitely going to talk about details of some of the stuff that happened in the book. It's too hard to do a book review, a quality book review, especially about a book that you loved. We both loved this one. We both want to talk about it a little bit, so we're going to talk about it. But we won't ruin like major key plot points, I don't think.
Yes.
Like I will ruin like very specific detailed lines of dialogue that won't reveal anything about the plot because that's part of what I fixated on while I was reading it.
Yeah.
But then I think we'll talk overall
That's
about
kind of what
the book.
the book is about.
Huh? Yeah.
That's kind of what the book is about, more
Sure.
than the plot.
Sure.
The book is about the characters.
Yeah, no, totally true. Okay, so how do you want to kick off the conversation?
I guess we should explain the plot a little bit
Okay.
of the book.
Yep.
So the book is about, I just kicked my chair. The book is about 17, 16,
Sure.
that age range girl, and 17, Asa Holmes, yes. And she has OCD, and she's written by John Green, who does have OCD also. And it's really good to see that representation. And I just love her a lot, and I love her and I love that she is an OCD protagonist in a YA, probably extremely popular YA novel.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
Of course. No, that's excellent.
The thing.
Yeah.
And it is about her getting caught up with her best friend in this mystery about the disappearance of a local billionaire.
Yep.
And her semi-friendship with the billionaire's son, Davis Pickett.
Yeah, right. And so one of the things that I really loved about it too was that it could have easily been, not from John, it could have been, but it could have easily been like playing into the current trope of like the autistic super detectives.
Yeah.
Or like autism as a superpower. Rain Man, even back to Rain Man and like all of these kinds of things, right? Where that's one of the ways, while it's really awesome that there's representation in media.
And positive representation.
It's positive, I guess, right? But it's treating them a little bit like magical people, which is not the greatest kind of representation. And so it was great to see it. She's not a super good detective. So there's a minor spoiler. She doesn't immediately solve the case with her OCD powers. Which is great. Like I thought that was excellent, right?
Yeah.
She is working on this, not even necessarily in spite of her OCD, right? Yeah. It's more that's just a part of who she is as she's trying to work on the case.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say. It's hard for me to even say, like you said, that this book is about her trying to solve this case.
Because
like that's the framework that these characters kind of revolve around, but it's really about the characters and their relationships and stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay, cool.
So,
awesome. Yeah, that's sort of what it's about. And again, like no spoilers or no spoilers about like the plot and where it goes and stuff like that. But we'll talk a little bit about some specifics. I did want to say that we like I said, we listened to the audiobook, and so that was Kate Rudd. And I think that her, in combination with John's writing, is one of my favorite things. I think they are really, I like her voice for Davis in this, I thought was exceptional.
Yeah.
I think her voice in the Asa Holmesy conversations, which are sort of like the internal dialogue that she has. Yes, please.
Yes.
I thought that Kate Rudd did an amazing job in portraying those scenes in particular. I thought they were excellent.
Yeah, and in the Asa Holmesy conversations, just like something I wanted to point out is I think Holmesy, which is the main character's best friend's nickname for her, and like sort of how she refers to herself. And so her voice, I think, is like similar to Kate Rudd's. At least I actually don't know what Kate Rudd sounds like, but similar. It seems like it's her natural voice.
Right.
While Asa, who is her internal dialogue, OCD.
Her OCD compulsion.
Yes.
Talking to her. Yeah.
That is like a little bit. It's like you can add a little bit of malice to your voice. I don't know how to describe it. It's like it goes a little bit deeper, and words are more like spat instead of said. And it's just like everything. It's just like if you took her And if like there was a corrupted supervillain of Kate Rudd,
right.
that.
Or evil twin.
Yeah, our evil twin. That's what our evil twin sounds like.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, and I thought, like, as part again of talking about how Kate is reading John's work, like one of the things that I love in writing in general is the balance between what you call scene and summary, sort of, or dialogue and memory is how it's portrayed a lot. So two people will be having a conversation, and one person will say something that will remind the other person of something like that happened in their past, and then you'll get like this little description of them having this memory, and then you come back to the dialogue, and like no time has actually passed.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so that, if it's done poorly, you can lose the thread of the conversation, right? Like if it's 6 pages. Right. Like Patrick Rothfuss may do. Like I don't know if he does or not, but like I'm thinking about people who write these huge books, right?
Yeah.
George R. like 20 people die in the middle of a conversation. But like the idea that, you know, in the middle of this conversation you're going to jump back to this memory, and then that has to tie somehow into the conversation, so that when the conversation starts again, you're still on the thread. And it's difficult to do well. I think that the best person that I've ever seen do it is probably Rainbow Rowell. I think that the pacing in her books with that scene summary balance is remarkable. And I think John's in this book, particularly, he does it really well all the time. But I thought in this book, I noticed it. It was a really beautiful flow, and Kate's voice and the way that she read it and the way she paced it made it work perfectly for me. Like I thought that was a perfect example of the quality of the writing of this book. Structurally, was in that scene versus summary balance.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just like such good writing.
It is.
So
it's really good. It's beautiful. And I'm fond of saying too that I think that John Green is just trying to get back at me for you making him cry all those years ago.
Yeah.
Because every time a new book of his comes out, like I think I cried in the car like 3 times. Because since we were listening to it on the audiobook, I'm like driving on the 405 stuck in traffic, like tears rolling down my face, like looking at other drivers.
I couldn't let myself cry because when I was listening to it, I was on the way to a
program.
I was on the way to an audition,
right.
And I was like, can't cry.
It's getting you in an emotional place though. Yeah, it was perfect. Yeah, it was beautifully done. Okay, go ahead. You have a point?
Yes, let me throw one of the things out there. A lot of my notes are about Daisy, just because who is Asa's best friend.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you haven't seen this, you have to watch this now, but just for my frame of mental reference, Asa and Holmesy are visually, they're the main 2 characters in Easy A. Right there.
I keep thinking you're talking about the Easy U.
No. So we'll watch the Easy A movie, and they fit those 2 characters like extremely well to me.
So is it
visually?
E, the letter.
Easy.
A.
Yeah. Cool. Like an E, like a class can be an Easy A.
Oh.
Like in college, everybody signs up for. That's not what it means in the title. Don't worry about it. But it's a pun on that. And then there's something that rhymes. That we'll leave that all for a later time.
Whatever. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Daisy.
We went far afield there for a second. But yeah, that's how in my head I picture these 2 characters.
That's what they look like.
Yeah. Especially Daisy. Daisy like perfectly fits with
Yes,
I don't know
I love
the actress's
Daisy.
name, but she's yep, go ahead.
And I love Kate's voice. I keep thinking I'm talking about Kate from Lost. Kate's voice for Daisy.
Yeah.
I really like, and now like I almost catch some of my thoughts in that voice. I don't know what about it makes it so easy. For things to come across in her voice.
She has a beautiful reading voice. Like that's all there is to it. So this, I don't know, should I do my favorite line or the one that gives me pause?
You should do it.
I'm gonna do my favorite line.
Okay.
Like, so I'm gonna argue forever, maybe, until something else happens, that this is going to be my favorite line of John Green writing ever. Out of all of the stuff that I've read, and I think I've read everything now. I'm gonna say this is my favorite line that has come out of any of his writing. It is Asa comes home and her mom was grading quizzes with her feet up on the coffee table.
Yeah.
And I read that as she was grading quizzes with her feet up on the coffee table. And that mental image will never leave me. It will never leave me. And I don't know why, and I heard it twice because I was listening ahead, or not listening ahead, but I started listening to the book to make sure Presley should listen to it, I guess. And then I got almost finished with it, and we went back and listened together when we finished the book that Presley and I were listening to together. And so the first time I heard it, and then the second time I heard it the same way. She was grading quizzes with her feet. Like that sentence just stopped there for me, and then up on the coffee table kind of came in.
How does that happen?
And that may be what was happening. I'm just gonna say that might have been a little John Green Easter egg.
That's what was.
And that's what was. But it was so normal that she didn't even think about saying something about it. She just said, yeah, she was grading quizzes with her feet up on the coffee table. Right? Just to prove she could do it, you know, like when I was in high school, me and my best friend, we went on this like crusade of trying to do weird things just to prove we could do it. Like for a day in school, we would go through a day and not use one of the letters of the alphabet. Like in any word that we said, that letter couldn't be there. And then the next day would be the next letter. And we just did all these weird mental and physical challenges like that. So maybe her mom is like that, and she's like, I want to see if I can grade these quizzes with my feet.
And
like
she's
that
doing
was
it on
her
the coffee
off on the coffee table. Yeah. So my favorite line of John Green writing ever.
Yeah, I don't understand how that happens to you.
Okay, your turn.
Okay, my turn. We'll keep talking about like general details of the book, and then I kind of want to go into talking about the characters individually because I have a lot of notes on them
good. Okay.
themselves.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess one of my favorite lines in the book I have in here is, if I die, weep at my grave until a seedling appears in the dirt, then cry on it to make it grow, until I become a beautiful tree whose roots surround my body. Yeah. Which is Daisy, I think one of Daisy's best lines.
Yeah, I think you're a Daisy.
I'm a Daisy stan.
Oh, do you want to talk about
this?
Oh my
god, yes, I do.
Good God.
Daisy stan.
Daisy stan. Okay, go. What does that mean, and how is that relevant to what we're talking about?
Okay, so first of all, stan means it used to mean like a mega fan of someone they were a stan of that person. Yep. Where it's just become to mean like they are your favorite in this general series. It's usually a lot in Voltron fandom, like I am a Pigeon Lance stan.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right. So that's what it means, like the person you stan most in the series. And like stan is now a verb.
It means the person you stan most. You can't use that.
Yes, I can.
You can't define it with stan in the.
The person you like most.
I think everybody gets it. Yes.
Stan. Anyway, I'm sure you can. So, in the book, also, this is like unrelated because I just said that normally. Yeah. But in the book, also, one of the reasons why I stan Daisy is because she says, someone is like how do I describe this on camera for a channel?
Don't worry about why, but she called one of her fans.
She called someone who messaged her a Kylo stan as an insult because she writes Star Wars fan fiction, and it was just resonated with me so
and it went
much.
like I had no idea what but I did get when Presley started explaining to it, I was like, you mean Stan from the Eminem song? And she's like, yeah, that's where it came from. I'm like, oh yay, I got a reference.
But yeah, like,
and then there was also like an AO3
yes,
reference.
She says she gets kudos on her fanfics, which is an AO3 thing. So AO3 is the best place to get fanfic. I'd like to point out that you capitalized the O in AO3 in your notes.
I don't care. So good. Kudos to John for the accurate representation of fanficdom, because Presley totally got it in.
Yes, I did. I understood what they were saying, and like whenever Daisy was talking about her fic, I was like, yes, I understand what's going on. It's amazing.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about again, like writing structure. I thought that it was really interesting when she had her first kind of date with Davis.
Oh, yeah.
I loved the idea of setting an appointment for one of your characters in the future of your book, and then going away and doing other stuff, and then having your character show back up at that appointment. Like setting this milestone in the future that your readers are anticipating is coming up in the writing, I think is really interesting, because a lot of times when I'm writing, like I'm working on our book or something, I'm sort of, it's start here and sort of move this way. And I know some stuff that's coming up out here, but I very rarely mention that in the writing, to let the readers know, hey, in 4 chapters we're going to end up, this thing's going to happen, so anticipate this thing coming. And so building some anticipation and giving these waypoints for your readers to sort of hang the story on, I think it's brilliant.
That's
really a great idea. And I'm sure it happens in a lot of the stuff that I read, but I never noticed it in the way that kind of John did it in some of this book. So I thought that's a really interesting thing that I'm actually going to try and bring into some of our writing.
Yeah, because in a lot of the books that a lot of the books that I read, there are no characters don't set up appointments. They just go and they do things.
It's just a flow. It's a window that you're watching this person's life.
And real people set up appointments. Real people will be like, hey, let's go meet at 2 o'clock on Tuesday and do this. And it's so cool that that was in this book.
But just as a reader, it's interesting. It's another point of interest to keep your attention and maybe keep you reading until that thing happens. Like, oh, I want to wait and see how their date goes. Yeah. So I'm going to read through this scene to kind of get to. Yeah, it's a really interesting. I thought it was, again, structurally really was well done.
Yeah.
I did want to point out too, one of the things when I was talking about scene versus summary, like dialogue and then summary, that was a really weird one for me.
Oh yeah.
Towards the end of the book. And I don't know, like part of it was there was this uncomfortableness in the relationship of the characters who said this stuff. And so it felt a little uncomfortable to me in the way that it was written because I love that flow of scene versus summary. And it was, she says, Aza said, sure. I said, if you don't mind being harassed by my mother. And this is after a big piece of dialogue. So she said, if you don't mind being harassed by my mother. And he assured me he didn't, and we hugged goodbye. And it's this really weird little flow of you have this dialogue. And so you're listening to the characters' exact lines back and forth. And then this last line is, he assured me he didn't.
Yeah.
So it's not him in dialogue saying, I don't mind.
Yeah.
Right? And it probably would have taken the same character count. It's not like there was a huge piece of dialogue that would have had to happen that is being summarized by he assured me he wouldn't. Like it's a similar length.
Yeah.
And so this flow from dialogue to summary and a description of something that happened, I thought was a really interesting transition in that one part of the book. Yeah. It really jumped out at me. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it means anything. I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional. It's just something that as I was reading it and listening to it, it really kind of jumped out at me as this weird transition from dialogue to summary that I wouldn't have expected to happen there. Because normally summary, you want to summarize a bunch of stuff that would take a lot of dialogue, whereas that didn't do that. Yeah. I thought that was interesting. Okay?
Okay. So more things about just specific characters. Okay, so this is sort of looping back to Aza's internal dialogue with Holmesy. And like she talks a lot about how she doesn't feel like she is in control of her like she doesn't feel like she's in control of her thoughts and her body.
Right.
And she's talking about that.
Yep.
And like listening to it, at some points it was kind of relatable, and it's really scary that it's relatable. And it's like scary as a concept.
No, I think
that's really cool.
No, I think that John did a great job of making the story relatable to everyone.
Yeah.
Enough. Everyone has these feelings, and Aza talked about it several times in the book. Like you have this feeling, like everyone feels this way, but then you move on. Yeah. You let it go and move on to your next thought, and I can't. Like I'm trapped by this, and so I think he did a great job of making the feeling universal. Like you can understand what this feels like, but you only experience it for a couple of seconds, and then you go on and do something else. Imagine if you were trapped in that feeling and the tightening spiral,
wonderful.
Right? And so I thought that the way I agree, the way he did that, it didn't feel like I can't relate to this character because of this mental illness that she has. It was more okay, I get it. Like he's putting it in terms that I understand because I feel those same ways. Like you said, it's relatable, and then you have to imagine what it would be like to not be able to escape it. That's a great point.
Really, really
excellent,
cool.
excellent.
And it's like this book is scarier than a horror game I played earlier.
I totally agree. It was horrifying. It was horrifying.
It's scary, and it's not scary because there's like murder and death going on.
When she really got into her internal dialogue, it was terrifying.
It was,
and in a subtle way. Yes. And like you said, Kate Rudd's voice as Aza, evil Aza, having that conversation was just for some reason I was anxiety filled. It was terrifying to me. I totally agree.
Yep. So cool that he did that.
So on the other side of something that I really loved, especially from Davis, was Presley and I both love astronomy.
Yeah.
And so I like to think and talk a lot about the amount of time it took for starlight to reach us.
Yes.
Right? And that we're seeing that star 5 million years ago. And that star may not even be there anymore, right? Or like we will say if you watch the news or something, you'll say, hey, a supernova happened yesterday. And I'm like, a supernova happened like 17 million years ago. And we just started seeing it yesterday. Yeah, right. And so the weird language even around the time gaps. But in all of that time, I have never thought about reversing the perspective on that and saying, someone living on a planet in a solar system around that star who is looking at our star as a distant star is seeing the sunlight the way it was when we lived in Hawaii, or before the day Presley was born, or before Mommy and I met, like when we were in college, or when my parents were dating, and like sort of chronologically looking at the history of your life or those around you's lives in terms of the distance to a star where people would be seeing the sunlight that was happening at. It's brilliant.
So cool.
It is. It is
so cool.
Brilliant, and it makes your head spin if you start thinking about it. And I will forever think about it that way. And Davis's association of there's this one point in my life that was excellent, and so my favorite star will always be a star that is the proper distance from us, that they are seeing sunlight that happened at that time.
Yeah.
And so when the time changes, I have to find a star that's further away that will now be my favorite, and then another one and another one. I mean, that is just fantastic. That's fantastic. I love it.
That's amazing.
Could not love that conceptually more. I think it's
rad.
brilliant. I think it's brilliant.
I think it's really cool. Okay, so to picture of Tuatara. Let's talk about Tuatara a little bit, because Tuatara is really cool.
All right.
And you have a minor complaint about wording in Tuatara.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, so I said that, and this is not John's thing. I hear this referenced all the time, right? But they say that the Tuatara can live to be at least 150 years old. Like, I just hate that wording, because it feels like it doesn't mean anything. Like, you might as well just say he can live to be at least 10 years old. Right. It's at least 10. But even if he lived to be 180 or 100, it's not like an average age or a maximum age or a minimum age, which there's no such thing as a minimum age. There's like no, I don't know what that means to say at least 150 years old. I don't know why that bothers me so much.
It's trying to sound impressive.
But it does, it bothers me.
I wonder what the actual maximum age of a Tuatara lifespan is.
But that would be more helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They live
a maximum, up to 175 years.
That would be really
would
cool.
Be totally awesome.
You should say that.
Which would not be at least 150 years.
And that's just a linguistics thing. That's not like John's fault or anything.
Yeah, right.
So
at most is kind of.
Look at this. Right. I have a picture of a Tuatara. I'm trying to show it to you. It's going to be on the screen.
Okay.
But they look so cool, and like they're a really big part of the book. I didn't know they existed, which really disappoints me as a huge fan of lizards. And I was like, gonna say it, and I had them. I just went with it. But yes, I'm a huge fan of lizards. I love lizards a bunch, and I'm upset that I didn't know that specific lizard existed. But it's so cool. It's it looks really cool. It looks like basically like a kind of like a bearded dragon.
Yeah.
But it can live.
It's really a little alligator-y. It's a little.
It's really, and it can live to be really old, and it has a lot of really cool like metabolism.
Well, I mean, the important thing is that they haven't changed from dinosaur times.
It's weird. It's scary.
They're the same as they were. They haven't really evolved.
What is the secret?
Yeah, right.
Because that makes
Not that one has lived that long, but as a species, they haven't changed, right?
And that makes me really suspicious of Tuatara.
Yeah, right.
Like, what is their secret?
All right, so I've only really got, I think I got like 2 working points, so we got to wrap this up. It's going to be a long conversation, because we both really love this book.
Such a good book.
And you talked about this a little bit too. So this is the difference, but it's about the stories that we tell. And it makes me think of NerdCon, like we are made of stories, like we are our stories. I studied philosophy in college, right? And so a lot of that was about your identity is about narrative. Mm-hmm. And so it's less about any parts of you or memory. It's about like this consistent narrative of your life that defines your identity in this way, right? And so John in the book kind of flips it around a little bit in that your life is the collection of stories people tell about you, right?
Yeah.
You think you're the painter, but you're the canvas, kind of type lines that he used in that. I thought that was really brilliant. And then in the end, the closest I'm going to get to sort of spoilery is reconciling the stories that we tell about each other with the realities of each other is an important thing, right? And the stories like the magical autistic detective boy, right? The guy that's going to go to Vegas and run all the tables in Vegas, or Monk as a detective. Like, that's a story that we tell about autism, that, oh, this person has like these quasi-magical capabilities. And then when you're faced with the reality of that situation, it's a very different thing, and you have to find a way to reconcile this story that you've been telling yourself with the reality of the world, and so you have to edit your story sort of. You have to create a new story to make it align with what's properly happening. And there are several ways one can edit their internal story to match the world as it is. And you have to choose which of those paths you go down. Or so maybe you don't choose. Maybe it's also like this thing, you don't choose your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
You don't choose which path you go down. It's just when this mismatch happens, it has to reconcile somehow. And the world has to reconcile. And maybe you're not even in charge of how that reconciles, but big pieces of the book are about reconciling the stories that people are telling about each other with the story that person is telling and the reality of the situation, in as much as there is one. And sort of this reconciliation of all of these narratives coming together into it starts out with each person is telling their own story, and I think that plays on the fanfic, right? That Daisy writes.
Yeah.
It's sort of a direct a reference to we're telling these stories. Like our lives are fanfic.
Yeah.
Right? And I have this fanfic that I write about you in my head. That may not be who you really are or what you think. I think these things about you that are my fanfic about who you are. And you write stuff that's your fanfic about me. And then at some point, as we come closer and have more conversations about each other and with each other, those two stories have to sort of collide and reconcile into one greater narrative that's internally consistent. And this book, I think, is a lot about the collapsing of those narratives into, good grief, I'm getting too deep into this. John's like, I just wrote a book.
It's like that thing in English class, and they give you a poem, and they're like, analyze the line that says the sky is blue.
And the author comes in, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's crazy. You need to slow down a little bit.
No, but it's cool. That's a good interpretation of it, and I really hope.
Okay, so you go, and then I think we're close to done.
Okay, I'm just gonna rapid fire a bunch of my notes because I didn't get actually a lot of them.
Yep.
Holmesy is a really cute nickname.
Yes.
Michael is spelled Mycheal.
I know.
And I was like,
blown away. The big baby. I was blown away when I read that. Okay.
Scary.
Go ahead.
Holmesy says Michael Mel to refer to Michael at one point, even though his name is Michael Turner. They refer to him as Michael Mel, and I don't know if it's a Be More Chill reference.
Oh, interesting. Did you look that up to see what it looked like as in print?
No, I should.
We should totally do that. Okay.
Michael Mel is Michael from Be More
Presley,
Chill.
we almost had an accident on the 405 again, driving, and Presley, she said Michael Mel, and we're like, oh my God, rewind, and it was a whole to-do.
Michael from Be More Chill.
Whole to-do.
This would be, I was listening to Poland Banana's books, who's one of my favorite booktubers. I was listening to her book talk, and she talked about how this would be a really hard film to make because all of this book is inside of Holmesy.
Yep.
And that would be hard to make in film.
Like a Fight Club-y kind of thing, which you haven't seen.
I haven't seen Fight Club
Yeah,
either.
don't worry about it. Yep.
Hi-Fi Fight Club?
No.
Ooh.
Different Fight Club.
Aw.
But there's a lot of interval dialogue in that one too.
Yes. Another thing, a lot of these are points that I thought were really good in Poland Banana's thing.
Yep.
People keep watching. Aza says she doesn't like space movies. People keep making Aza watch space movies. No matter what, they keep making Aza watch space movies.
Right.
There's so many other movies.
Yep.
Okay.
We have both kinds, Star Wars and Star Trek. Right, that's fine. And that has got to be a reference to the Blues Brothers, right?
Yeah.
Where they go to a bar to play, and they're like, what kind of music do you normally have here? And they're like, oh, we got both kinds, country and Western. One of the best lines in all of film. Yeah, we have both kinds of movies, Star Wars and Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's got to be the same.
Both
Okay,
kinds
go
of
ahead.
movies, period.
Yep.
Okay, this is very, this is like a very vague spoiler, and it's just that, I cried about the ending because it's like,
of course.
I guess it's bittersweet is like what that is. And
there's like I want to talk about the ending and about the narrative change and about what happened there because structurally I think it's really fascinating and would love to go into it, but it's too spoilery.
Too spoilery.
Yeah, I can't
really good ending. I cried. I was on the way to an audition and I was trying
Maybe
not to cry.
in a year we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
That's a conversation I'd love to have too.
I don't remember what, didn't we have an official, there's like an official internet, you wait this
How long you have to wait? Yeah, we'll look it up.
We'll look it up. Anyway, this is another random detail, which might be kind of spoilers, so I'm not going to say it. Noah deserves a lot better. I love him so much. Noah is a good character. He only has like 4. He only has a few lines, and most of which
They're
are
all
sup.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
And it was mentioned at one point in the book, I think, that like...
Slavic.
It was said at one point in the book, I think, that like Noah at this point has been replaced with an AI of Noah that says "sup, cool," and like that, those kinds of words. Yeah. And I think that's cool. Noah deserves a lot better.
Okay.
Davis's poems are really amazing, and I think it's really cool how John writes poems from the perspective of a character. He writes someone writing.
Yeah, I had this huge thought about Davis's journal entries begin with quotes like from authors, right? And so I went down a rabbit hole of, was this an excuse for John to pull some of his favorite quotes from books and poems and things he wanted people to read and plant them in the book so that people would read those and then go read those books? Or was John putting what he thought would be Davis's favorite quotes, even if they weren't necessarily John's favorite quotes? Like I thought that I'll have to ask him that at some point in time. I thought that was fascinating.
That's a great question.
Yep.
That's.
Go ahead.
I say that whenever I want to say that's a good question.
No, go ahead. Okay, this will be our last thing because I think this is one of both of our favorite things. Does that sentence make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
One of both of our favorites.
This is the thing that is a favorite thing of both of ours.
That's even worse.
I know, it's a weird structure. Okay, go ahead.
Anyway, okay, so Davis and Holmesy are FaceTiming.
Yeah.
And Holmesy is talking about how, like, the only light in her room is the light from his room, and the only light in his room is the light from her room, and how
they even kind of
technically,
intermingle. Yeah, the light the light from his room comes through off of her computer screen and bounces off of her face and back into the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
She's being lit by his face almost.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And then she says, like, and because of that, she's not FaceTiming with Davis in his room, and she's not FaceTiming from her room to Davis's room.
Yeah.
They're meeting in this mid-space.
Yeah, they're creating this third space that
Yeah.
they're meeting in. That's a shared space between these two, like a bubble. It was a beautiful imagery.
Cool.
Again, like just the book overall, and we don't want to talk a ton about the spoilers and the plot and stuff like that, but these little moments, the internal dialogue, and the thing about the stars and having a favorite star based on how far away it is and where the light that is reaching that star left out her star, and this scene about the lighting and these kinds of things, like they're so well thought out and so beautifully written that just make you stop and think about what he's saying when he wrote it, right? You have to kind of to pause a little bit and be like, wow, that's a beautiful image that he just painted with words, right? There, right? And that's definitely one of John's strong points.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. I agree. Totally agree.
Good
Loved
book.
it. Loved
Yes.
it. Fantastic book. Read it.
Definitely.
Let us know what you think down in the comments below.
Woo.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'd love to know what you guys thought about it.
You should totally talk to it.
You should talk to it.
Talk about it to us.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Or leave a comment below, as I said.
Yeah.
In a far more concise manner. You can, yeah. So if you've read the book, let us know what you think about it, what your favorite lines were, what your favorite parts were, because I think this is I really loved it. Yeah,
Yes.
really
And
loved it.
please let us know if you have heard the usage of Stan before this video.
Yeah.
Because this is now something that I'm really
This is
interested
how I learned
in.
it. This is how I learned about Stans.
Stan.
Even though I knew about Stan. I knew about the. Have you even heard the Eminem
Nope.
song? Yeah, so
I mean, probably, but I haven't. No.
You probably
I
know
know
if
it
you
was
heard
that
that
song.
one. Okay, let's get out of here.
So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to leave a comment below and press the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. Leave book recommendations in the comments below, please, because
We still need
we
book
always
books.
we need more book books, and we always need more books.
We do.
Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye, guys.